you can enter into the chat. And if you'd like a copy of the report, I put a link to how to download that into the chat as well. And on the last slide, it will be there again, but you can just get it directly from the chat if you would like. So my name is Craig Lyon, and I'm the Director of Road Safety Engineering at the Traffic Injury Research Foundation here in Ottawa. I have over 25 years of experience in transportation engineering with a focus on the quantitative analysis of road safety, including the development and evaluation of road safety improvement programs, investigating the safety effects of planning and design decisions, before-after crash investigation studies, and the investigation of vehicle-pedestrian crashes. My co-presenter is Bill Bland, CEO of Medidas Digital. Excuse me. Bill has developed several driver-related technologies and has worked with major healthcare systems, governments, and leading driver education associations in assessing and improving driver safety. He currently sits on the research committee for the American Driver and Traffic Safety Association, is a knowledge department for the Associated Transportation Safety Professionals. The Safe Roads Challenge currently has active campaigns and participating drivers in the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. The community involved is growing, and with regional governments, safety associations, national student groups, marketing partners, driver education, and corporate partners, it's a growing thing that's really working to improve driver safety hopefully across the globe. To start, a little background about TURF for those who may be unfamiliar. We are a registered charity conducting research in traffic safety, developing related programs and policies, and conducting evaluations and knowledge transfer for both the public and private sector. The vision of TURF is to ensure people using roads make it home safely every day by eliminating road deaths, serious injuries, and their social costs. Our mission is to be the knowledge source for safer road users and a world leader in research, program, and policy development, evaluation, and knowledge transfer. I'd like to acknowledge the financial support of the Government of Canada through the Enhanced Road Safety Transfer Payment Program. This program provides funding to support projects aimed to reduce roadway collisions and their outcomes, including the development of tools that address roadway safety challenges in Canada. Currently, there's an unmet need to positively influence driver behavior post-driver training and licensing. Punitive measures for poor driving, such as fines and higher insurance costs, are reactive in nature and not affected over the entire driver population. So historically, governments have solely taken on the responsibility of addressing road safety through instituting laws and regulations, enforcement, and providing safe infrastructure. App-based programs designed to improve driver behaviors are a way for the private sector to become involved in promoting road safety through the application of technology. Another unmet need is the ability to identify areas of high crash risk related to distracted and aggressive driving and speeding. The use of crash data is problematic as these data typically lag by at least a year, and crashes are relatively rare events. So this means that new risks cannot be quickly identified and interventions undertaken. The new sources of data are needed to enable proactive actions that support the safe systems approach. The project collected driver risk data from licensed drivers from across Canada participating in a national Safe Roads Challenge competition running from May 15th, 2025 to September 15th. Participating drivers downloaded and used the Safe Roads Challenge app that monitors driver behavior and incentivizes safe driving through rewards and competition. Driving behavior data recorded and scored included vehicle speed, harsh accelerations, harsh braking, cornering, steadiness, and phone handling. The driver risk data and driver behavior scores were presented privately to each participant through a web-based driver engagement portal customized to provide different challenges, rewards, educational assets, and driver risk information to different subgroups of the project participants. The goal of the analysis of driver risks was to evaluate the impact of different messaging and incentives for improving driver behaviors and see if this impact differed with respect to gender and age. This knowledge can be used to improve the tool by more effectively encouraging users to drive safely. The project also used the driver risk data collected to demonstrate how real-time risk data can be used by governments for road safety management tasks, including proactively identifying areas of higher risk that can be improved through applying safety interventions, and then after evaluating the impacts of safety countermeasures aimed at reducing crashes. So for these objectives, the driver risk data collected within the city of Edmonton, Alberta, were used to develop crash prediction models, which we often call safety performance functions, for urban signalized intersections. And Alberta-wide data were used to identify areas with a high number of clustered driver risk events and to develop machine learning models to predict the probability of future crash occurrence based on these data. So in summary, the project addressed programs designed to engage drivers in traffic safety in an inclusive manner, real-world data collected in real time on driver behavior at scale, private sector involvement in improving road safety, and developing new tools for improving road safety outcomes based on driver risk event data. Okay, now I'm just going to pass it over to Bill briefly. He's going to show the actual apps just so you can have an idea of what that looks like.
Thanks, Craig. Much appreciated, and welcome everyone. Really appreciate joining today. So I will switch over to the app. Everyone can see that okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah, great, thanks. So just a little bit of background on the Safe Roads Challenge app and kind of the way we did things. So here at Medius Digital, there's a lot of telematics apps out there. We actually wanted to build something that was for the driver, using behavioral science data platforms and what we call the 3E framework, which is education, engagement, and environment. So we really wanted to build something that was for the driver and use behavioral science to change driver behavior, not just show them their scoring and leave them to their own devices. So I'll walk you briefly through the app, just to give you, I'm sure a lot of people on this call have already been in the app and seen it, but you can see that we can do a number of things. We've really built this using gamification and some other learning principles. So you can see one of the things we do is we want you to always have instant feedback on the scores so our users see their last trip. They can level up in the game, so to speak. So by getting safe scores, they can actually get experience points. They can level up. They can compete against family and friends. They can compete and see where they stand in the nation. We're really trying to build what we like to call a safe driving loyalty program here. So you can literally see where you stand in the nation with your friend groups, that type of thing. We use teams because teams are a powerful motivator for people. So if you become part of a team and part of a community, we think that has great engagement power. We also want to show your progress. So we show you the XP or the points you've earned. You can earn contest entries in the app. We know that some people don't drive every day, but we want to encourage driver awareness every day. So we do things like our daily trivia, which is 5 questions, takes about 60 seconds to do. And if you get it right, you get entered into daily gift card draws. We have other contests as well. And then we have safety rewards for that kind of intrinsic fill. So I won't go too deep into that. When we developed this and we started working on this app, we really wanted a more comprehensive driver behavior scoring data set than most of the telematics we're providing. So we actually use a very comprehensive driver behavior scoring. You can see that we're giving feedback on your last trip, your week, and your month. We also incorporate, instead of just showing you a score, we're incorporating some of the game-based principles and the behavioral science where you can get streaks. You can see that we do the normal types of scoring, brakes and cornering, but we also do things like swerve, steadiness, and we do aggregated scores like our eco score, our focus score, and handling score, which are basically built algorithmically through components of these different driver behavior scores. And you can see that we give tips as well on how to improve. So we want people to always be working on improving this every day in order to climb leaderboards and get rewards. You can go in and claim your trip. So when you do that, it will actually give you those scores. And you can see that we've used behavioral science like health and wellness, where you can see your progress. You can make sure you're above a certain line. In this case, we use safety for that. We also built this as a collaborative tool, and that's why we're so honored to be able to work with groups like TURF on these campaigns and big student organizations and governments. We want to actually be collaborative and be a collaborative technology partner. One of the things we do is we also get the community involved. So we're able to utilize reward zones across our maps. I think we have about 170,000 of those right now in North America. But what we want to do is we want to encourage community partners to get involved in rewarding safe driving as well. We feel that this can't be done in a silo. Driver safety has to be done as a group. We also have teams, so you can see that this is mine actually. So I'm number 65 right now on Team Alberta. This really puts that bond together. It makes me want to drive to get to the top, and we've found it to be a powerful motivator. In this, we can develop different teams as well, and that's part of the project that Craig's going to talk about, is we're able to actually have sub-teams and be able to monitor how they were doing, and I'll let Craig get to that. And then we can also do challenges, and you can see our team is pretty creative in what we do. Again, we leave that to our partners, but we've got our Safe Sleigh giveaway going right now where we donate to charities and things like that. A little bit on the quest. So we have our weekly mission, daily trivia. We can do all kinds of game-based assets. We do custom as well. This one, we've got our Safe Sleigh giveaway going. So we're actually giving some to the driver, some to charity. And then we can actually utilize those for all kinds of different sources. One little piece on here is that we've built this so that we can use this for research. We think it's really, really important that we look at the effectiveness, and that's why this is such an important project that TURF let us be a part of. But we have certain things like vehicle types where we can actually look at what types of vehicles, what's gender, what's age range. We want to be able to really drill down and go, how can we make this more effective? Our goal is simply to reduce the severity and frequency of vehicle collisions and save lives. And of course, working with collaborative partners, we can really work on those win-win outcomes. So I'll pass it back to Craig.
Great, thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to describing the study, participants were randomly assigned into 1 of 5 teams, and those teams are roughly balanced by age, gender, and province of residence. And then in the first 2 weeks of the study, all participants were subject to a welcome series of in-app inbox messages to welcome them to the Safe Roads Challenge app and orient them with elements of the Great Canadian Driving Games. And then following the welcome series, teams were subjected to a series of interventions with 5 different categories of in-app messaging. So each intervention strategy was 2 weeks in duration, and each team received the same number of intervention category segments throughout the duration of the challenge. Each team received the various interventions on their own unique schedule, serving to provide some randomness to the process and deal with the potential confounding factor of length of time the driver was using the app before receiving the intervention. Then intervention A was just the standard program, and that served as a baseline. So intervention B involved driving tips. So for this, teams in this category, users would receive messages that focused on driving tips provided by TURF, containing links to additional content, including blog articles and video podcasts. So just an example of some message copy. Distracted driving equals increased risk. Texting while driving makes you 23 times more likely to crash. Don't risk your life or others for the sake of a quick text. Silence your phone and focus on driving. You're in control, and that's what matters. Then this particular one had a link to one of our TURF blogs on distracted driving. Intervention C involved motivational messaging. So for teams in this intervention category, users would receive messages that focused on providing encouragement about the campaign and or team progress, leaderboard positions, or milestones. As an example copy, we have rise to this skill challenge by putting your phone away. This month's challenge is a $100 gift card for earning a phone score of 90 plus. Every safe drive with a high phone score could win you a gift card of your choice. So cue up your music, pre-plan your route, and drive phone free. And then finally, intervention D involved fun challenges. So for teams in this category, users would receive messages that focused on providing additional ideas to challenge yourself or make improvements to your driving that weren't related to official Great Canadian Driving Game skill challenges. An example message, hey Coastal Comets, which is one of the teams, We challenge you to collect a 3-day safe driving streak. A streak is earned by achieving a daily average score of 70 plus and maintaining it for a minimum of 2 driving days. Don't worry, you won't lose your streaks on days you don't drive. Get your streak started today. Participants also had access to a custom web portal that showcased their team leaderboards, the skill challenges, self-improvement challenge, as well as the grand prize and challenge details. And just so you know, there's much more detail on all these things on the engagement and communication provided in the project report, which I encourage everyone to download and read through. So to collect data, the app's recording at a frequent rate, speeds, G-forces associated with braking, acceleration and cornering, as well as the locations and durations of telematic events associated with all these measurements. The app's also recording counter-rotational movements of the phone, signifying that the phone is being handled while the vehicle is moving. And this raw telematic data is then compared against contextualized thresholds to identify individual de-identified risk events that exceed these thresholds and records the locations and the durations of these events. This risk information is also being used in the proprietary scoring algorithm of the application to develop unbiased driver behavior scores. The driver behavior scoring system has unique algorithmic inputs designed to ensure that there's quality and fairness in the scoring. So the production of driving scores do not penalize drivers for factors out of their control. So for instance, to account for driving context, weather trends, regional differences, road types, speed limits, topography, and vehicle types are considered. So it's quite complicated. As well as driver risk and behavior data and scoring, the app collects other valuable data points that can be analyzed and incorporated for research purposes. Great for me. These include the number of kilometers traveled, trip start point, end point, and duration. The effectiveness of interventions was evaluated by analyzing overall driver scores and driver risk events. So each observation in the data represented a 2-week driving intervention period for a driver. And statistical models were developed to relate the outcomes to driver demographics and to which messaging and incentive scenario was being presented at that time. So because the outcome and explanatory variables are random with unobserved heterogeneity, statistical models are needed to identify these relationships. So for driver score models, we developed models for total score, phone score, and speed score, and for each 3 alternate models were estimated. So model 1 looked at the overall effect of each intervention compared to the baseline and included terms for the intervention type, the study week, the distance driven, and age. Models 2 and 3 investigated if the intervention effects differed by gender and driver age. The model showed that total score increased with the number of weeks into the study, suggesting that drivers were improving the longer they were using the app. But for speed and phone score, the opposite was true, actually, suggesting that when it came to phone use and speeding, drivers initially became more cognizant of these risks, but this awareness or concern decreased over time. Other interesting things we see are older drivers tended to have higher scores. Males had lower scores, except for the phone score. They actually had a higher score than the female drivers. And for the interventions, small increases for each were seen over the baseline for total score, in contrast to small decreases for the speed score and mixed results for phone score. But we did find the magnitudes of the differences were relatively small and not statistically significant. But we did see, though, that positive effects of interventions were greater for male drivers and for drivers under the age of 26. For the driver risk events, we developed models for total number of events, non-phone events, speed events, and phone events. And again, 3 alternate models were estimated for each to look at both the overall effects of the interventions and how they may have differed based on age and gender. So for all types of events, their frequency increased with the total distance driven, as would be expected. The number of total non-phone and phone events decreased with driver age. But interestingly, speed events increased for drivers 26 plus, although the difference in that case was not statistically significant. Male drivers experienced a higher number of events, again, except for phone events, which are higher for females. And as far as the interventions, we saw decreases for interventions B and C, which was the driving tips and the motivational messaging. We saw decreases for all events, range from, say, 1% to 7%. A decrease for intervention D, which is the fund challenges, was seen for phone events. The differences, however, were not statistically significant between which was higher or lower. Positive effects of the interventions were generally greater for male drivers, with the exception of speeding events, and for driver age, effects were greater for drivers under age 26 for all event types except speed events. So essentially, these things, it looked like it was more effective for the people who are worse at the behavior to begin with. Now, talk about the safety performance functions. Road safety management includes screening the network for sites with the potential for safety improvement, diagnosing safety problems at specific sites, and evaluating the safety effectiveness of implemented countermeasures. Now, it's important that these activities be both efficient and methodologically sound, since resources would otherwise be wasted on unnecessary treatments for safe elements, and elements deserving of treatment would be left untreated. So the methodologies for conducting these activities make use of statistical models to predict expected crash frequencies using traffic volumes and other site characteristics as the input to the models. As I mentioned, they're typically called safety performance functions. So consistent with the state-of-the-art methods for developing safety performance functions, generalized linear modeling with the specification of a negative binomial error structure was used to develop SPS for signalized intersections in the city of Edmonton. The driver risk events occurring within 50 meters of the intersection center were considered, and 3 sets of models were developed, with separate models for predicting fatal and injury crashes and property damage only crashes. So the first use only measures of average annual daily traffic, or ADT, as the exposure. So that's sort of like a typical SPF that you would see. The second used only driver risk data as the measure of exposure. And the third used both ADTs and driver risk data for exposure. Now, the model form for the models is shown on this slide. Predictive variables used included major and minor road ADTs, the number of intersection legs, the number of vehicle trips observed by the app, the sum of risk events, and the rate of risk events calculated as the number of events divided by the number of vehicle trips observed. All parameters of the models were estimated with high statistical significance. The estimated models were consistent with similar models from other jurisdictions, showing that crashes increase at higher levels of major and minor road ADTs. They also showed that crashes increase with a larger number of recorded trips, which you sort of expect where ADTs are higher, that's where people are driving. As well, intersections with 4 legs are expected to have more crashes than 3-legged intersections, and a higher number of crashes were also seen with all types, or a larger number of all types of driver risk events. Turning risk events were the type of driver risk event that resulted in the best model fit. I don't think that's surprising, given that conflicts involving turning vehicles are pretty common at intersections. So as an illustration of one way the models could be used, consider a city has introduced a temporary countermeasure across a group of 10 signalized intersections intended to slow down turning vehicles. So the city would like to estimate what was the effect of the countermeasure on crashes to decide whether to keep it in place, but to do so with crash data would require waiting years to conduct the evaluation. So an estimate of the expected change in crashes can be determined by using the models incorporating driver risk data. So using the best fitting models, which include both ADTs and the turning risk variable, an estimate of effectiveness can be determined. So the models would be applied to each of the 10 locations for a time period prior to and after the countermeasure was implemented, and the estimates of PDO and fatal and injury crashes summed and compared. So just to illustrate, consider one location with a major road ADT of 15,000 and a minor road ADT of 5,000. The expected crashes before and after are determined using the equations shown. It's assumed that the rate of turning risk events decreased from 0.25 to 0.15 at this location. So if we do that, we can see the models estimate the effect of the countermeasure as a reduction of 6.5 PDO crashes and 2 fatal and injury crashes per year. So now we can do this type of evaluation without having to wait, 3, 4, 5 years after to collect enough crash data to determine if something was effective, which is particularly a concern when you get into rare crash types. Okay, now, Bill, you take over again. Bill's going to illustrate the mapping of the driver risk data province-wide in Alberta.
Great, thanks, Greg. Again, everybody can see that okay?
Yes, looks good.
Beautiful. So yeah, as you can see, as Craig said, we did work with Alberta, City of Edmonton, and Province of Alberta, and Craig input data. We actually took that and visualized that. So I'll give you just a brief representation of how Craig was talking about how this could be used. So what we did is we actually did a hotspot evaluation and visualization on this data. So basically, because we're working with City of Edmonton, we concentrated on the City of Edmonton primarily. When we go into one of these hotspots, it's pretty cool the way that Craig's modeled these out. Typically, what you would see when you're looking at a lot of the traffic data is historic collisions, which we plotted on this. But now with the addition of these risk events, you can really start to see what this looks like in a particular area. So as Craig mentioned, signalized intersections, we can do this anywhere, but basically with this, you start to get a pattern of what's the risk inside. And that's a little bit about what Craig was talking about. If I take away the boundary and the hotspots, you can see that now you can start to analyze what's happening inside of that hotspot. And so we can literally look at the hotspot details. So what's the major speed event or what's the major events that are happening inside of that particular hotspot? You can look at driver behavior events. So you can literally look at the individual events and the aggregated events. Those are all de-identified, by the way, before they get visualized. But you can see that that's the driver event. And then with the help of the authority, you can actually look at collision data as well. So in some places, depending on what we get for collision, you can literally have the ages of the drivers involved, how many vehicles, what type of collision it is. In this case, with the collision data that we received, we were able to say if it was an injury, a PDO, property damage only, fatality, and then you can really start to dig in. So yeah, very quick, obviously, show of the valuation, but now you can start to see where you get these overlapping risk profiles, and you can start to really hone in on areas that you need to work on, as Craig mentioned, with the countermeasures. So yeah, Craig, anything else you want to see on that, or does that work for you?
Oh, that's good. Thank you, Bill.
Good. Yep.
Okay, so we did some really neat analysis with that driver risk data in the mapping tool. So this analysis investigated the ability of driver risk data to identify locations with a high probability of experiencing a crash in the near term. So locations of high risk were identified by applying dbScan, which is an unsupervised clustering algorithm that groups together points that are closely packed and marks as outliers those points that lie alone in low density regions. So clusters with a minimum of 200 risk events were identified based on driver risk event data for 2024 for the entire province of Alberta. And crashes that occurred within these clusters were assigned, and both crashes and driver risk events summarized by month. So to predict the probability of a given cluster to experience a future crash, XGBoost classification models were developed. Now, these are a type of machine learning model based off of decision trees. The figure on the slide illustrates a simple decision tree, and a series of decision trees split the clusters into smaller groups referred to as leaves by defining thresholds for the predictive variables. So for example, a break might be, is the number of speed events greater than 20? So the intent is to group clusters into homogeneous groups by their probability of having a crash. And using the defined clusters, models were built to ingest the driver risk event data for a single month and to predict the probability of that cluster to have at least one crash in the next 3 months. So the clustering algorithm identified 363 different clusters across Alberta, and these data were split into a randomly selected training data set with 80% of locations and a validation data set with the remaining 20% of locations. The independent variables used for the models included the number of left turning, right turning, phone, acceleration, braking, and speed events, and separate models were developed for total crashes and for fatal injury. So if the probability of a future crash exceeded 50%, then a cluster was considered as having a positive prediction for a future crash in the next 3-month period. Shown on the slide are the confusion matrices from the validation data, which show, so if it's a true label of 0, that means no crash was observed. True label 1 is the crash was observed, predicted label 0, no crash was predicted, and a predicted label 1 was a crash predicted. So for total crashes, most clusters where a future crash did occur were correctly predicted, with 387 true positives and 146 false negatives. For clusters that did not experience a future crash, the number of true negatives and false positives were roughly balanced. And similarly, for fatal and injury crashes, most clusters where a future crash occurred were correctly predicted again, with 209 true positives and 139 false negatives. And for clusters that did not experience a future crash, the number of true negatives was actually larger than the false positives. And then as a further test of the model's ability to predict locations where a crash is likely to occur, driver risk data from just December 2024 were used to predict the probability of a crash occurring during January to March of 2025. So this table shows for several probability thresholds the number of clusters predicted to have a future crash and the number of clusters that actually did. So the results show that the majority of clusters selected did have at least one future near-term crash, and that the percentage of correct predictions increases as that probability threshold increases, plateauing at about 80%. So the results demonstrate that the driver risk data are useful for identifying locations likely to experience a crash in the near term. In this case, we looked at 3 months, showing that these data and types of models can support proactive monitoring and intervention, particularly for situations where the level of safety is changing over a short period of time. So the results from this project provide valuable evidence about both the potential of gamified app-based interventions to influence driver behavior and the potential use of real-time driver risk data in advancing proactive road safety management. Together, the findings reinforce the importance of moving beyond reactive approaches to crashes and instead leveraging technology to predict, prevent, and address risky behaviors and to address high crash risk locations proactively. Future research should build on these findings by exploring how to maintain behavioral improvements beyond initial engagement, particularly for phone use and speeding. More work is also needed to test new types of messaging, incentives, and technological features that resonate with higher risk groups, such as younger drivers. And then on the system side, pilot programs integrating real-time risk data into municipal or provincial safety management frameworks could provide a roadmap for scaling this approach nationally. In summary, this project has shown that app-based interventions can positively influence driver behavior and can generate risk data that support predictive, proactive safety management. Together, these contributions represent a meaningful step toward the safety system approach, or a vision of preventing death and serious injury on Canadian roads. So I'd like to thank everyone who took the time today to attend the webinar. So like I said, if you have any questions for myself or for Bill, please enter them into the chat. And if we can't get to your question today, please feel free to email me at craigl@turf.ca, and I will get back to you shortly. Okay, so let's check out the chat here. Okay, I see someone's raised their hand. I think we prefer to probably just use the chat to do that. So if you could put your question to the chat. Oh, here's one came through the Q&A. Okay, so the Q&A is working for some people, though. We were testing the Q&A before and it didn't want to work. So the question is, just wondering, what's the basis to mention that texting while driving increases risk by 23 times? Has Turf undertaken any study on this aspect? I don't have the reference on the top of my head. It wasn't a study that Turf did, but that was something published study. I can look that offline and get back to you on that. I don't have that on the top of my head at the moment. Okay, so how many participants were in the challenge? What was the age distribution? Okay, I think it was a little over 1,000 total registrants. Some were in the study for the entire time, some came and went, but that was the total. The age distribution, I can't tell you that again off the top of my head, but we did have a good distribution. I think the youngest was 15, the oldest was the 80s, I want to say.
Yeah, I think 16 to 89 was the age distribution, so it was pretty good. Yeah, and I think it was about 1,400 total participants that were actually participating, and then there was more that were existing that jumped in as well.
Yeah, we had, I know, a good amount of under 26 and over 26 too. So it wasn't like, kids weren't using it, or it was all, a certain age group. It was a pretty good distribution. Okay, so another question. Is it possible we can improve driver behavior through educational campaigns minus enforcement? Oh, that's an interesting question. Probably possible, but more difficult, I think. Enforcement is a key driver, but it is interesting that, I mean, this type of technology, I think, is another carrot. Well, this is a carrot. I guess enforcement's a stick. So this is providing a carrot that also gets you along that path. I would never say that enforcement's not needed, but I do think that we can do more with education campaigns and more supportive tools, like something like this, where you're engaging drivers. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add on that, we've actually been working with some groups on using data to actually look at the effectiveness of driver education. In fact, there's a presentation that's being given through one of our partners down in the US at the Transportation Research Board, that's looking at how to look at the effectiveness of driver education. So Ajmal, it's a great question. And again, that's everybody working together. That's the only way we can do this. So yeah, great question.
Here, I think this is probably a question for you, Bill, because it's getting into the technology
Yep.
of the app. What were the parameters definition of speed that you used? Were there ranges like 20 kilometers an hour over, 30 over, etc.? Essentially, it's getting us how is the speeding event
Yep.
defined?
Yeah, great question. I think that came from Lisa, I think. But yeah, really good question. We actually use a very different model. So a lot of the telematics we call trigger-based telematics. So basically what you're getting is that exact, you're 10 kilometers over, you're 20 kilometers over. When you do that, you arbitrarily take out if somebody is excessively speeding. So we actually use a contextual model where we're looking at a baseline of roadways and we measure the entire trip and then we measure the area under the graph. So when we say, were you speeding? We want that to be fair and contextual. If everybody's going, 20 kilometers an hour over the speed limit on the Anthony Henday, there are methods, and some of the speed management groups I work with hate this, but there's some methods where the most dangerous person is actually the person that's going 20 kilometers under the speed limit. And some states are now doing minimum and maximum speeds on certain roads. So excessive speed we've built based on an algorithm. We do use a meter per second threshold, and we do that above the baseline contextual speed. So it's a very different model. Be happy to talk to you about that at some point.
Just so everyone knows, we're getting a lot of messages, so I'm sort of curating them what I think most people are of interest. But afterwards, we'll have them all documented, and we'll go through if there's something that wasn't addressed, we can try and address it then, or feel free to email me as well, obviously. Um, Here's another one perhaps for you, Bill, from Catherine. Does this technology have the potential to assist parents monitoring the driving behavior of their new young driver children? Something I can relate to, perhaps by sharing info with the parent.
Yeah, good question, Catherine. I actually built this. I worked in telematics and technologies when my young people got their license. That's when I started building this actually. So yes, it does. It's very different than the Life 365. We want to build trust with our users. And so a lot of telematics is used to monitor and give that information back. So we've developed these gamified models. It's interesting. We've got a lot of parents that are actually using the competition. So they'll actually compete against their young drivers, which of course increases household safety, which is beautiful. But yeah, basically set up the challenge where you're competing against your young driver. You have to put yourself out there, but that will actually, we think that's the most effective where you're seeing their score, but you're actually competing with them. And it's a fun thing. So we've had people say they sit around the family table and compare scores, which is awesome. We love that.
Yeah. Darlene asks, have you conducted any pilots where participant-specific events were identified that contributed to the scores, like speeding or harsh acceleration, recognizing that it's a different level of data sharing and privacy consideration?
We've done many pilots, all de-identified. And again, because we have the ability to, as you saw from the Alberta study that we worked with Craig on, we can definitely perform any kind of pilot. We've got a great number, not only the driver risk and driver behavior data, but the engagement data. And again, I'm sure there's a bunch of people on this call that know me. The one thing we have to do is the juice has to be worth the squeeze, and we need to always be evolving this. And I saw that there's, some comments on here about, will the app continue? There's more things we can do. Absolutely, there's more things we can do. And the more collaboration we do, as a group, the more we're going to hone in on what's really effective and how can we really increase that driver safety and decrease driver risk events. So yeah, and thanks for that, Darlene. I appreciate it.
And someone was
Hopefully that answered your
asking,
question.
yeah. So someone was asking about a link to the report. It is in the chat. I'll just do it again because now it's all the way at the top. So I'll just put it into the chat again so everyone can click on that immediately. Okay. Okay, Mohammed's asking could you show how many times the driver was involved in speeding in a day and how much on average they were going above the speed limit?
Yes and yes. So most obviously our data is de-identified. We've built this all in privacy by design. We do work with some groups that have opt-in by either members or employees or groups like that. So I think the key with that one is yes, we can, and we've actually used that in studies, particularly with some states on did we reduce driver risk events, and that we've done that on an individual de-identified basis, and amazing results. So I'd love to get into that if anybody wants to have a chat with me, but yeah, we have definitely done that.
Saeed, pardon me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, is asking, is this app available to download and have similar data in Ottawa? Yeah, I'm in Ottawa. I use the app, so it's here. So my data
Yeah,
is
please
there
download.
somewhere. So it certainly is. Adam's asking, how could other jurisdictions access the data similar to what was shown for Edmonton?
Yeah, just reach out to me, and obviously I can put my email in the chat as well. But just reach out. We're using this all over with different partners. We're actually doing research with some major research institutions, along with groups like Craig, as well as municipalities, provincial and state governments, counties. Will help anybody make the road safer.
Okay, here's a really good question, and I know the answer, but it's a good one to ask. Quay is asking, how do you differentiate between a driver on the app or a passenger? So if you're on a bus or something.
Yep. So great question, Quay. Thanks for that. We actually right now use the honor system. So when you claim a trip, you actually take out your passenger trips. We do have some customized versions where we've actually got public transport. We've got groups that want to look at what is the method of transportation, because that's important for research as well. And so we actually have developed some pieces. We've got some groups that use Coach, and getting back to the parent student, and especially in driver education, we can do that. We do have, and I say this very reservedly, like with reservation, we can use RFID to identify the driver or the passenger. So basically the app identifies that the phone got in on one side of the vehicle. We're also developing technology on the turn radiuses using the lateral G forces, because you can tell which side the phone's on. Having said that, anybody that says they can tell if it's the driver passenger without cameras or other things, probably not, because you can have your phone in the center console, and it'll take away the lateral G forces and the other things we use. So yeah, thanks for that, Quay. I hope that answered somewhat.
Jennifer's asking if the presentation recording will be shared. We are recording it. We will share it probably on the Turf website at minimum. We do have everyone's email, so I'll try and get that information out to everybody afterwards. So I guess that's good. People want to see it more than once, Bill. So it must have been pretty good.
Uh-oh. It's going to cause a great question. No, it's good. I love it.
Let's see. Here's a question from Jose. Uh, have you had a chance to do something similar based on vehicle event data? If not, do you believe it would scale provide similar results? So I guess that's for me. No, I haven't personally done that. Well, actually, I guess that's sort of not true because I have a concurrent study going on right now that's not finished yet, where we're looking at how lowering posted speed limits affects safety, speed, and crashes on local roads as they're doing in neighborhood type roads, and that's using connected vehicle data. So I guess it's similar in the sense you're getting events, but the data provided here is much more. So the connected vehicle data is not giving you anything on if they were using their phone, for example. So there are other metrics as well that we're getting here that we can't get with the connected vehicle data. You're also asked, would there be bias in the type of participants that use the app, or they would already have an interest in driving safely? Um, well, maybe Bill, you could speak to it a bit more. I guess to me, of my sort of research review, I mean, I guess a bit of a bias, and you have to download the app. At the same time, this isn't an insurance app where if I drive safely, they're going to, give me a 10% break on my insurance or something. The reward I'm getting here is the opportunity to get gift cards and other types of rewards and compete with my friends. So um, you couldn't rule out that there's some sort of bias, but I don't think it's to the same degree that you would get with other types of apps. And I think that, if I look at the data that we collected, there are some bad drivers using the app. So it's not all good drivers.
Yeah, and I think I'll just expand on that. So we actually did a study with the Florida Department of Transportation that I found was so intriguing. So we like to develop different experiments to see how we can reach different populations. We actually broke out drivers based on their initial baseline results. And it was so cool because we actually saw the bottom group, because they were able to compete with other drivers of the same ability, they actually had a hockey stick increase in their scores, whereas the stable drivers kept it there, improved. But we really saw a nice improvement with those high risk drivers. So I think this is much different than, as Craig said, where you're going to get that self selection of drivers in most of the, and if there's any insurance people, sorry, but the usage based insurance groups, why would you use it if you're going to get your premiums increased or not at all? So I think, as Craig said, this is really about the driver competing against themselves. And so, yeah, great question.
There's a couple of, I guess, related questions. So Ahmed is asking if the app has been piloted elsewhere besides Alberta. And Tom's asking if or not we, but have you explored opportunities to use the app in the US, for example,
Yeah,
here?
we're currently the app is being used in 48 states right now and every province. We're on little islands, we're in Hawaii, and I saw some users in Puerto Rico. We're actually running a Hawaii Safe Roads Challenge in 2026 with the Hawaii DOT. So yeah, we've done extensive work down there, and even with some really cool projects. And I just say this because I think it's so important that we all get this mentality of working together. One of the coolest projects we've worked on lately is called Sober Ride Indiana, and they actually give out Uber and Lyft coupons for drivers. So working on impaired driving, and so we don't actually work directly on impaired driving, but they were just giving those all away. And they really started to go, how can we use this to increase driving behavior while they get the coupons? And so every long weekend, people that have the app get an inbox message and they say, you can go and get your coupon now. And the data that came out of that is so incredible on how the driver behavior change was done. And it's people that wanted an Uber or Lyft coupon. So the way that you can utilize and build these campaigns is so exciting to me. So yeah, we've done a lot of work everywhere with some major academic institutions as well, and we encourage that.
There's a question from Mohammed asking, as someone from a city, if they could set up a challenge for a focus group to study their driving performance and behavior, and then how would they access the data if they did such a thing?
Yeah, I think again that just reach out. We're working with groups all over the place. So if you want to reach out and some groups obviously are working through us, and we really encourage turf if you want to do some research with your data science groups. But either or, if you have groups, we're happy to sit down and work out a project with you. And thanks, Mohammed.
Troy's asking, are you able to share any insights or learnings related to the recruitment campaigns or promotions uptake on engaging with the app? Well, I could say from my perspective, and we've got decent numbers using the app, but I think we could have had a lot more if we'd had like a sponsoring partner, like a large insurance company, province. I know, Bill, you've done work with some groups in Florida. We have 5,000 teenagers,
Yeah.
just one thing. So maybe you could speak to that as
Yeah.
well.
Again, I love the term, so I'm going to use it again, but the juice has to be worth the squeeze. We have to have the collaboration. To be quite honest, I thought the recruitment engagement was amazing. Like, I thought Turf did an amazing job reaching out to partners. It was pretty slow on the uptake, as Craig said, with some of the bigger groups, because we work on an organic growth basis. I'd hate to say we're not profit funded. We are for profit, but we really care more about the mission. So I think with that engagement, I'll give you an example. We have a Safe Roads Challenge going with a student association down in the US, 5,000 schools, 275,000 members. Every year we've ran that campaign, and they told me right off the bat, 3 years from now, you're going to get great engagement. If you have to keep working on these things, we've tripled the number of participants in that every year. And they've actually started getting community partners involved as well to provide more rewards for them. That's how you create change. And it's not going to be quick, but I thought for year one, this was amazing. I was really happy with the engagement stats, and recruiting could have been better with more partners and more acceptance, but that'll come.
Here's a good question from Suzanne asking if we could use the data to establish a correlation between poor driving behavior and risk of being in a high severity collision. So that would be a privacy issue. So like in our study, we didn't collect any information on their driving history or something. I think the only way you could do that would be to ask people and hope they answer honestly to get that information.
Yeah, opt-in too. I mean, if you do develop the right program and it's opt-in voluntary, you can do different things. I think working with some, as Craig said, some of the insurance groups where they're looking at claims and things like that. And we're working with several, but I think getting that where you're using that de-identified data and using it with claims and other things. There's ways in the middle where to de-identify who the person is from our data and from the other data source. And I think that's a way to study that. So I think it's a great, Suzanne. I think it's a really good question.
Yeah. So Van is asking, have we done any analysis with motorcyclists? So for our project, we didn't look at what vehicle they registered with the app. I'll let you start, Bill, but I believe any user can be using multiple types of vehicles because it considers what you're driving when it calculates all those scores. And I think motorcycles is one of them.
Yeah, definitely. We've got scooters and motorcycles, and we're working with a few groups right now on e-bikes because it's new and they're becoming quite dangerous out there. So yeah, we're working right now with the City of London over in the UK. They have about 50,000 motorcycle couriers in that city, and there's a death every 19 minutes in the UK on a motorcycle, believe it or not. So we're working on being able to do that through the competition. So we have our join codes, and so if you enter as a motorcyclist, then we can look at that while you're driving your motorcycle, and we do switch them if you want to drive your motorcycle to work and then you jump in your semi and drive for work. A lot of different G-forces going on. So we've made it so you can just touch a button and change your vehicle on the fly.
Okay. Here's a question I appreciate from Raw about SPFs. Could you speak to the sample size for your SPF development? Did you have a way to select sites with no near crash events, or all data points were from the sites you observed risky behavior? So the way we developed a database, we had a shape file that had all the signals, and then we used sort of cross-matched signals that had at least a minimum number. I forget what my cutoff was, but a certain number of vehicle trips. So we had to have, people using the app actually going through those sites. And then from those, we took a subset of around, I think it was around 100, and then collected some additional data. So every site we used had some exposure in terms of app users. And then another question, Catherine's asking, does this technology have the potential to assist parents monitoring the driver behavior of their new young driver? I guess maybe that's similar to the other
we
question.
did that one already.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was the one you did. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay. Back to the chat. Jose is asking, as a follow-up to that question about the people getting into fatalities and crashes, you may not be able to get the actual severity of an impact, but with time you may get collisions captured in the app data. Could use that information. That's a good question.
And I
They do have
actually
hard
did throw
accelerations. Sorry, go ahead, Bo.
Yeah, I threw that in the chat to Josie. I wasn't sure if we're going to get to that, and if it's Jose, sorry. But yeah, the zero deceleration, because we can do actually extreme lateral G forces both ways as well. And I am not getting into accident recreation, which is kind of what that is. But you can use a zero deceleration event. And that will be extreme no matter what. It's either an extremely hard, it's where it just stopped and it's not natural. It's the same with the phone handling. We use counter rotational measurements of the device to look at phone handling. Same thing with that. So really good point, Jose. That's what it is. It's zero deceleration. Could not have happened if it was just pure braking.
Okay, I guess we've hit one, so maybe we'll just do one last question and then we'll end with the webinar. So Kwai is asking, are you still collecting data or recruiting into the original Canada Challenge?
Yeah, so we have challenges going all the time. We have, that's part of the deal is right now it's our Safe Sleigh giveaway for December. But we always have Safe Roads challenges going and we can do custom ones. We have been asked by many groups to extend the Great Canadian Driving Games for next year. And so we don't have a specific project in place, but because of the interest, we might just have to do that again, which was great. It was super fun. But yeah, we can get enough groups involved. I think we can make it happen.
Great.
And thanks, Quay.
Thanks, Bill. So it's 1 o'clock, so 1:01. So I guess we'll shut it down now. So thanks again to everybody for coming and engaging and giving us some great questions. I did post the download to the report in the chat once more, so it's the latest thing in there, and I'll just leave it open for perhaps another minute to give everyone a chance if they haven't downloaded to do so. But again, thanks again for joining. We really appreciate everyone's interest in attending our webinar today.
Have a great day, everyone. Appreciate y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.